Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. We now have just 35 days left in Donald Trump's presidency, and many of his supporters are still refusing to acknowledge reality. At the top of the list is the man on your screen, Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin. He chairs the Senate Homeland Security Committee, so you'd think he would know better, but I'll save the suspense. He does not. Johnson presided over a hearing today with witnesses continuing to spread conspiracy theories about the election and other lies that have been repeated ad nauseum by the president and his lackeys. But there was a voice of reason. Christopher Krebs, he, the Homeland Security official who was fired by Trump after he had the temerity to say that the election was in fact successful and secure without widespread fraud. Take a listen to Krebs today.
The citizens of the United States of America that are responsible for executing this sacred democratic institution of elections are being threatened on a daily basis. This is not America I recognize, and it's got to stop. We need everyone across the leadership ranks to stand up. I think I would appreciate more support from my own party, the Republican Party, to call this stuff out and end it. We got to move on.
Now, Trump may try something else. He is reportedly pushing for a special counsel to investigate election fraud and another one to probe Hunter Biden's tax and business affairs. CNN saying Trump views that as payback for the Russia probe. But if you think about it, I struggle to find any logic with this. Joe Biden had nothing to do with the Mueller probe, and of course, Trump has legal issues of his own to deal with. Now, the Manhattan DA, he's investigating the Trump Organization, and the state's attorney general leading a tax fraud investigation into Trump's companies. They've been trying to block the release of documents demanded by the AG, but a state judge just ruled that they have to turn them over. Those cases and more expected to heat up once Trump leaves office. But on the federal front, Joe Biden has said that he wants to move on and avoid investigations of the former president that could further divide this country. I want to bring in our guest to discuss. He is a former federal prosecutor himself, Roland Riopelle. And Roland, let me first ask the broader question, because I've heard debates and they reference, Nixon and what Ford decided to do, that forgetting even the malfeasance potentially of Trump, that it's in the nation's best interest to close the chapter and move forward. Conversely, I see other people saying, no one should be above the law, especially the President of the United States, and we need accountability, maybe as a deterrent so we don't go through what we went through the next time, somebody like him takes the Oval. Where do you fall on that?
Richard, I fall on the side of a full and fair federal investigation if there are no pardons, and a prosecution if the proof is there to bring it. This is very different than the Nixon case in that Mr. Trump, having been caught red-handed, never saw justice, was not forced out of office, was not removed by the Senate. His conduct during the election now has been just awful and so damaging, and indeed perhaps illegal in many respects. So I think that there's got to be a full investigation in this circumstance. It's not a circumstance like Nixon where the guy resigned in disgrace. This guy's going out and damaging everything he can on his way out the door. It's a terrible situation. And frankly, the obstruction of the Mueller investigation that he engaged in, that's got to be punished. If it's not punished, it'll happen every time there's an investigation going forward.
Well,
he's got to be prosecuted.
And let's put this in a couple buckets. First, on the federal, the expectation, I'd be shocked that there's not going to be a conga line of pardons handed out, including to the first family. If the president, and obviously he could step down and have Pence do it, but if the president tries to pardon himself, I know it's unsettled. If you try to read the tea leaves as to whether or not it's permissible or not, or if it went to the high court, if they decide a president can pardon himself, where do you believe the court will come down on that?
I don't believe the court will allow the president to do that. Many commentators with higher IQs than mine have said that a president can't pardon himself. Lawrence Tribe, for example, it's all based on the principle that you cannot be a judge in your own case, which is what a president does when he pardons himself. So I don't believe the president will get away with that. I don't think it'll be effective. Whether the prosecutors will have the guts to go ahead and challenge that, I don't know. But I don't think that's a valid legal move by the president.
In terms of a pardon, is it clear, Roland, even if you take the president out of the equation, that you can pardon someone for not just past crimes, but basically even those that have yet to be raised? Do you have to have a level of specificity? There's been a debate around that. Or can you basically just do a blanket pardon of past and future?
You can do a blanket pardon of all past conduct in crimes, right? And that's what happened in Nixon. Nixon was pardoned for all past conduct and any crimes. You cannot pardon for any future criminal conduct. So if, for example, Mr. Trump resigns the day before Biden takes office and Pence pardons him on the very last day of the Trump-Pence presidency, Pence could, in theory, pardon the president in connection with all conduct up until January 20th. But if the president commits a crime on January 21st or January 22nd, a new crime, that cannot be pardoned. You cannot have a pardon that goes into the future, only one that applies to conduct in the past.
Do you have to specify what you're being pardoned for? Meaning if there is something that hasn't come to light, do you have to basically, put that down on paper as to this is what I'm looking to be pardoned for? Or let's say there's a revelation 6 months from now that we, have, self-enrichment or whatever the case may be of the president. Will he have to articulate the actions that he wants to be pardoned for?
To some degree, yes. Again, this is a pretty open issue legally. There's not a whole lot of precedent on it, but a pardon needs to have some specificity so we know what has been pardoned. And if, for example, the president does not mention, and to accept a pardon is in effect an admission of guilt, which is why the president may not do it. I think he's got too big an ego to allow for that, but that's another issue. But yes, there has to be enough specificity so that a subsequent court can see what it is that you were pardoned for. It's sort of like the double jeopardy bar against subsequent prosecution. You can't be prosecuted twice for the same crime, but you have to be able to see what the crime is that you were prosecuted for the first time. In this case, what the crime was that you were pardoned for the first time around, so that you then know if the pardon acts as a bar to a subsequent prosecution.
Let's get to where pardons won't work, and that's going to be at the state level. We know, and I mentioned before, Cy Vance is working on a case, we understand, at the Manhattan DA's office, and Letitia James at the state level for AG, and that's just what we know about right now. To your knowledge, how serious are the investigations, and which one should trouble Donald Trump more?
I think they are both serious investigations. I think Mr. Trump should be worried about both. I think the tax investigation at the AG's office really should be a layup. Just what we know about the Trump Foundation sounds like a very easy, straightforward tax case to make. And what we've seen reported in the press seems to demonstrate that there are many other tax crimes that could be prosecuted. And what we see in the press about the Cy Vance investigation also sounds like a pretty straightforward white-collar prosecution where there are two sets of books being kept, one for your insurance company and one for the tax authorities. And false business records is a classic New York State court white-collar prosecution. Now, whether these two offices will actually make their cases and follow through on them, I don't know. I don't have complete faith in that, despite the fact that I think the cases are straightforward, because I know that, both offices have sort of been buffaloed by Trump in the past, and maybe that'll happen again. We'll see.
Finally, we can see the finish line of the Trump term, but with Barr out of the way, and I certainly am not going to give him a hero's goodbye here, but nonetheless, with him gone, how much mischief could Trump be up to in the next month?
That depends on who takes Barr's place. If the person who is making the calls that Barr would ordinarily make is even more of a Trump partisan than Barr was, we could have a lot of trouble. There could be the appointment of a special counsel to investigate bogus allegations about Mr. Biden, President-elect Biden. We know there's been a threat to appoint a special counsel to investigate alleged tax violations by Hunter Biden. I'm not in a position to know whether that's bogus or not, but it's clear that the appointment of special counsel, as was the case with that U.S. attorney in Connecticut, is a strategy that Trump may decide to use to try to hamstring Biden's administration. If a special counsel is appointed, it's very hard to get rid of that person, and they can do a lot of damage without much evidence. With a lot less evidence than Robert Mueller had to go on, they could keep the investigation going for a long time, and it would be a real disaster in terms of the press for President Biden at a minimum.
Well, I would suggest to the outgoing president, if Biden seems willing to just move on from Trump, it may not be in Trump's best interest to try and poke the bear as he's going out the door. But Roland, it is always good to see you, and I think I speak for you that we dodged a bullet in November, but we got a lot of work to do to, put some more of at least the girders on the democracy that we maybe took for granted.
I think that's right. Trump is not going to go quietly into the night, and he's going to be around to try to kick the guardrails aside for a long time yet, and that's frightening.
That it is. Roland Riopelle, always great talking to you. Thank you.
Good to see you, Richard. Good to see you. Stay healthy.
You too. All right. When we come back, everyone, I want you to take a look at this new documentary out that I thought not only timely but really powerful. The maker of a new film and its relevance, particularly during this age of COVID. She'll join us. It shows a daycare center open 24 hours a day and watching the kids of essential workers who are suffering a lot due to this pandemic.